The Alien franchise is on a bit of a high at the moment with the recent release of Alien Earth to both critical and fan acclaim, and the recent love letters to the franchise coming in the form of the movie Alien Romulus last year, as well as the news that a sequel is currently being worked on for Alien Isolation, arguably the best Alien game ever made. You see, last year we also had Alien Rogue Incursion Part 1 arrive for VR, which caused a big splash for many fans of the franchise, and so today I wanted to do a quick vid about my hopes for Part 2. So, number 1, new locations. One of the standouts from Rogue Incursion is the setting itself. The base feels believable, it feels logically laid out and lived in, and after 2 playthroughs I'm fairly confident I could get around now without even using a map. But even for people who've only played the game through once, the tasks set to you in the latter part of the game in particular involve trudging across the breadth of the base multiple times. Survival horror fans, in particular, will be used to this, but nevertheless, as much as I like the setting, I don't want another 6 to 8 hours of walking around in the same area with just newly unlocked doors. Think of it this way, if this game was Resident Evil 2, then so far we've spent all of our time in the police station, and now Part 2 needs to head into the sewers. The setting Purdan is apparently an ex-mining planet, so maybe we will see a more industrial setting, such as a mining complex or something like that. Whatever it is, it needs to be different for at least a good portion of Part 2. Number 2, new enemy types. Rogue Incursion features 2 basic enemy types, your standard Xeno drones and your facehuggers, the latter of which were actually used pretty sparingly, meaning that other than one boss battle at the end of the game, you're basically fighting against the same Xeno drones throughout the majority of the game. Now, because of how well realised these Xenos are, I've never got bored of them. Particularly on insane difficulty, these critters are challenging, a constant threat, and every single one has the potential to kill you quickly. But one thing that other Alien games have done, albeit with varying degrees of success, is introduce new alien types. Now in Fireteam we had the Spitters, who would gob their acid at you. In Dark Descent we had the Chargers. Now I'm not sure that those would work that well in Rogue Incursion, but there is an alien type we have seen in Colonial Marines called the Lurker, who seems to bear at least a physical resemblance to the Xeno from Alien 3. This creature differs in that it will actively work to stay hidden, often moving sideways to try and get around you and attack you from a different angle. Maybe we could have a sequence where we're actually facing just one of these and the pacing becomes more like Alien Isolation for an hour. Perhaps the game can have us lose our weapons temporarily and have us rely on taking out the alien using the environment, such as luring it into a machine, similar to how Ripley and the prisoners used the lead press at the end of Alien 3. Maybe we steer away from the Xenos and change the pace entirely, with a sequence against androids like in Alien Isolation. Or instead of multiple androids, we have to face off against just one android, or even an AI in a game of cat and mouse. The company Weyland-Yutani and its androids have always been as much an antagonist as the Xenos in this universe. Part 1 at least appears to be teasing some type of new enemy in its closing moments. Number 3. A different save system, or at least some variation with the save rooms. Part 1 uses a system where there are panic rooms dotted all around the facility, and they're quite generously dotted around to the point it almost feels like save scumming when you're nipping into one every 5 minutes or so before each Xeno encounter. Some of the early ones are only about 30 seconds walk from each other. I'm hoping that these will be more evenly spaced out in Part 2 and that they look to Alien Isolation for inspiration with this. And if nothing else, maybe some variation with the save rooms. Look to Resident Evil where no 2 save rooms ever looked alike. Maybe we could even have the odd survivor NPC in one of them too, who's frozen and refuses to leave. And that brings me to number 4. More NPCs. There was one particularly cool moment in Part 1 where you're walking down a hallway and hear screaming, only to look up and see an NPC getting dragged through the ceiling by a Xeno, presumably to become a host for another Xeno. Other than this and a couple of dream sequences, I don't think I remember seeing many other human NPCs. Now the game does a good job of telling you stories through the emails and audio logs, but I guess what I'm really hoping for is to have more interaction with other humans. Not only will it be more interesting, but I think it will also help to flesh out the character of Zula a little more. There was quite a cool section of the game where you're playing and fighting alongside Davis, the android character, And it's quite fun but also quite immersive listening to the chatter that goes on between them both. And it seems like in part 2 we're at least going to come across this Ben Carver, the ex-Marine we originally came here searching for, and maybe a couple of survivors as well. And I do think that fighting alongside Ben and a couple of other survivors in a set piece would be pretty cool, which brings me on to number 4, more set pieces. Now part 1 did deliver on a few of these quite well, such as when you fight in the mess hall and get captured, and then again at the battle at Ops, but I still think it could have had more of them. Defensive set pieces where you have to prep your area ready for an attack would be cool, similar to Alien's Dark Descent, where you need to build up barricades, weld doors, lay mines, and set up your defensive turrets so that they're pointed right at alien choke points. Even commanding NPCs to guard a certain area. And maybe in one of these sequences we could finally get to use the smart gun. Yes, number 5, give us the smart gun. Picking up that pulse rifle in part 1 was a pretty special moment, as this is the first time that gamers and Alien fanboys like me will have properly got to hold one of these in VR. Equally thrilling to this would be getting to use the smart gun, and live out that Vasquez fantasy of letting rock and ripping a horde of Xenos to shreds. Other games have created these types of sequences, but being able to look down and see what is basically an MG42 strapped to your waist with a Steadicam mount would be something special indeed. And just like the Aliens movie, use it sparingly so that it remains something special. And that's the vid, guys. I'm really looking forward to part 2, and indeed what we get with the Alien franchise on the whole at the moment. Let me know what you'd also like to see in part 2, and thanks for watching.